Hi everyone, this is a video about exercise 3, the odd even. So let's take a quick look at the instructions. What are they asking you to do here? Here's a quick demo of what you're trying to achieve. So here we have a sprite that asks for a number. The user enters a number and it just indicates whether the number is odd or even. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Let's just stop that. Now, there's a couple of other requirements in here which are not shown in that demo. Notice down here it says write a program that prompts the user for a number, asks the user for a number. If the user enters Q, then end the program. So this program is supposed to keep running. You shouldn't just ask the question once. Note, to make this work, you'll have to do the extra credit part, see below. Okay, if the number is negative, then reject the number and ask the user to enter a positive number. Otherwise, check to see if the number is odd or even. Now, how can we tell if a number is odd or even? If you recall from exercise 2, where we were checking to see if a number was a multiple of 5, we know a number is a multiple of 5, as in this case, if the number is evenly divisible by 5. So 5 goes into 25 an even number of times with no remainder. So this is true for 30, 35, 40, 45, and so on. Now, over here, if we mod 25 by 4, the remainder is a 1 because 4 goes into 25 6 times, which would equal 24, has a remainder of 1. So if we divide a number by 2, what are the possible remainders? Well, there's only 2 remainders. If 2 goes in evenly into the number, then we say the number is evenly divisible by 2, and therefore the remainder is 0. If the number 2 does not divide evenly into a number, there's always going to be a remainder of 1. Now, if the remainder is 0, we can say the number is even. If the remainder is 1, we can say the number is odd. And that's the trick here. So here is some logic that you could use. So there are 2 conditions that you have to check before starting to check for odd even. Those 2 conditions are, first you have to check and see if the user wants to quit. If they want to quit, you shouldn't be checking if it's odd or even. And if they don't want to quit, then you have to check and see if the number is positive, meaning greater than 0. Greater than or equal to 0. It turns out 0 is even. So we can use a compound if. So here you can see the logic. So we want to do this forever. Well, until they enter a Q. So here you can check to see if they entered a Q. If they did, you can end the program. If they didn't enter a Q, you carry on to here and say, well, is the number they entered less than 0? And if it is, you can print an error message. Otherwise, you continue down to here. Now, if you get to this point, you know they didn't type a Q, and you know the number is positive. So then this is where you would do the mod. And if the remainder is 0, then you announce that it's positive, or it's even. And if the remainder, otherwise, if it's not even, it must be odd. So you say the number is odd. And it just repeats this and goes around and around forever. Now for the extra credit, one way to check to see if they entered the letter Q instead of a number is, it says, what if the user enters a non-numeric data such as dog? Dog is not a number. If you try this, you will see that Scratch says that dog is even. Why is that? Well, we won't get into the details of why it thinks that dog is even, but we want to be able to detect if the user entered something like dog, or in our case, we want to check and see if they entered something that's not a number, namely the Q. So you can save their answer into a variable called temp. Then you can add 1 to temp and then subtract 1 from temp. And if temp is not equal to the original answer, then you know the user did not enter a number. That's a little complicated. Let's try that again. So you take what they gave you. You can now you don't want to mess around with what they gave you because it might be a real number. So you store it in a temporary variable. You add 1 to it, and then you subtract 1, and then add 1. Now, if this is a number, you should wind up with the same number. If I subtract a number from something and add a number to it, I should get the original number. So then you want to compare temp to answer. And if temp is not equal to the answer, then you know the user did not enter a number. We're going to assume they entered a Q. So let's try this. Let's zoom out. It sounds like a lot. It kind of is. Let's start out simple. So here now this example is not doing everything we are supposed to do. In fact, it's doing too much. Let's break it apart. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we get a number from the user, so you can use the ask block. Now, where does the number go? Well, if you look over here under sensing, there is a built-in variable called answer. Whenever the user types something in, it goes into this variable called answer, and you can test answer. Now, the first thing we want to do is check to see if what they gave you is a Q. So let's come over here. Let's start simple first. Let's just do the odd even stuff first. So we can. Here's our if-else block. So now we want to make the test. Now I don't really want to use their code so much, but I do want this thing. So I want this whole thing. So this is where you're going to make the test. So the incoming answer is divided by 2, modulo division 2, and if the result is 0, you know it's even. So here we can say it's even. We can wait for, all right, let's wait for 3 seconds. Now, if it's not even, it must be odd. So we simply take this and put it in there. Now, we can run this script just by clicking on it. So let's click on it, and there he says, okay, that's an even number. Okay, I didn't do the ask. Let's take the ask over here. The reason it probably said it's even, we haven't even entered anything because it, by default, answer is just set to 0. So let's put this over here, and now let's ask. Okay, give me a number. I'm going to give it 44. Press enter. That's an even number. Now note I have to run it again to try an odd number. So I click on the script. Notice it gets highlighted in yellow. This time I enter 45. Press the check mark or press enter, and that's an odd number. So that much is working. Now that's the real bulk of it. Now, what was one of the conditions is we have to make sure that this incoming number is greater than 0. So for that, we need another if-else. Now we can take all our code here and stick it into the else part. Well, we can put it into here. Now, what's the test we're going to use here? Well, we want to see which operator can we use. We want to check and see if let's just check for greater than 0. So here we want to check to see if something is greater than 0, and that something, let's go back to sensing. Let's get a copy of our built-in answer variable and plug it into here. So we want to check and see if the answer is greater than 0, then we can ask the user for a real number. Well, no, that's not quite right. We first have to, whoops, okay. We first have to ask for the number. Let's do it there. Then we check to see if the answer is greater than 0, and if it is, we do our test. Now, what happens if the answer is not greater than 0? Well, then we have to tell them that they gave us the wrong input, so we can use this say. I can put that over here, and we can say your number is negative. Please enter a positive number. I will say that for 2 seconds. So let's try that. Let's run the script again. And this time I'm going to give it a 0. Enter. Okay, it says it's negative. Maybe the message should say your number, oops, your number, oops, is not greater than 0. Okay, let's run it again. Click on the script. I enter the 0. Press enter. Okay, your number is not greater than 0. Now let's run it again with a negative number, negative 100. And again, we get the error message. So that much is working. Let's get rid of all this other stuff we don't need. No, we don't need that. Now, no, we want to do this forever. So let's plug it into there. So now we can run it with the green flag and say, give me a number. Okay, it's 45. That's an odd number. And now it asks again, give it 46. It's an even number. And you can see it just goes on and on. But how do I want to be able to break out of this. So how can we do that? Remember we said we can store our, let's create another variable called temp. Now, how are we going to do this? We first get the number. Let's take all this out. And we need another test. Before we do any of this, we need to check to see if they entered a queue. So we need another if-else block. So here we're going to check to see if they entered the queue. And then we'll end the program. Otherwise, we'll do our loop or do our testing. So how can we do that? Well, the idea was that you would, let's create a custom block. I'm going to make a block, and see, add a label, add an input value, add an input value. Okay, I can't return. Okay, I'm going to do the next part in another video. I'd like to just keep this one relatively simple. So if you just put this in here, now it will just run forever, always asking for odd or even, and it'll also make the test to make sure it's greater than 0. So here we check, is it greater than 0? Yes. Then we check for odd even. If it's not greater than 0, then we print the error message. So we can come over here and add our comment. So here is an error. Display error. Error message. over here we want to get a number from the user. And in here, we're going to test the number. Test the number. And then down here, we're going to say if it's odd or even. Okay, let's stop it. All right, for the last part, I'm going to create another video for that. So let's stop this one here.